Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of This is Revolution Podcast. I'm your host, Jason Miles, and I want to apologize for being a little more tardy than usual. Technical difficulties over here in Mexico are on a different level today, to say the least. That being said, for all the returning listeners and subscribers, so glad to have you back. Welcome. I promise you will get those 15 minutes back. Gratis. And then we're going to go to the champagne room and just talk a lot of shit because I'm not in the cheeriest of moods. But you know what I am cheery about? I finally got my ticket to DC for the live show, Beyond the Black Jacobins, CLR James, and the struggle for socialism in America. With Adolph Reed, Pascal Robert, what, Daniel Tutt, C. Derek Varn, and me, Jason Miles, hosting it all. Should be a good time. We're going to be doing a after party because after the club, it's the after party. So there are tickets available to that. That'll be a lot more personal. You can ask questions of the guests. Pascal said he's so excited for you guys to bombard him with reading list questions and just all questions, Pascal. All the Pascal questions you've been holding in for the last 4 years. Definitely get it all out. June 8th. I'm excited for that. And there should be some, podcast celebrities in the crowd. Mac said he's coming up. Marcus from Left Flank Vets will be there for sure. And other people have said they're coming through. So it should be a good time. I'm excited for that. Now, let me bring in my guest who will be coming back here Thursday so we can discuss not just an article we wrote, but a book we're writing together. So I'm excited for Thursday's show, but I'm also excited for this show. I know you guys like Alex. I like Alex. Please welcome historian and someone I'm very proud to call a friend, Alexander Herbert.
From one bald brother to another. Happy to see you.
I want to say before we even get into Lenin, you are doing an Indiegogo for a children's book. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, that's right. A while back I wrote a children's book. It came from my own experience with my daughter. I was 25 when she was born, and I was like really into punk rock my entire life, going to shows with friends with spiky jackets and crazy hair and all that stuff. And I just, and I was at the University of Chicago when she was born with a bunch of like, I hope they don't hear this, but normies, and some of them had kids that were my daughter's age. And I just thought, I didn't realize how strange punk rock in the subculture is until my daughter was born. Then it became vivid, and I started noticing how other parents were so different and how their friends were different, how their musical tastes were different. Nobody else read zines. Nobody dyed their hair. Nobody did mutual aid stuff. And so I wrote this children's book with the idea of trying to humanize punk parents to a kid, to try to make sense of it, because I think that some of the elements of punk rock are actually really great assets for raising kids, really good, compassionate ethics. And I had a friend of mine based in Providence do the illustrations for it. Now, the problem is that children's books are like a dime a dozen. You go to Savers or something and you just see all the children's books. So publishers don't really publish children's books unless it's like a celebrity that wrote it or somebody that has a reputation for children's books. But we did manage to get a publisher to agree to distribution and marketing of the book if we can pay for its printing. So we have an Indiegogo campaign to try to get that funding to print it because we want to do it in color because it should be a colorful book. But it's called My Punk Parents. If you type into Google My Punk Parents Indiegogo, you'll probably find it. So,
Do you
yeah,
want to give me a link and I can put it in the chat?
yeah, I could do that. I'll try to get that. Yeah.
Because let me see if I can forward it. If you can't get it, I'll see if I can forward it from Instagram and definitely put it in the chat. Wherever you are listening to the show, we will put a link in the description for the audio only podcast. And wherever you're watching the show, I'll definitely put a link in the chat, and I'll also put a link in the comments. The pictures I saw actually look really cool. Who's the illustrator?
The illustrator is my friend Vic, who is a comic book artist. They do like their own comic books called Nowhere Comics. That's NO, where comics with an X. They're on like Instagram and stuff. They're really great artists. They've done a lot of things for me, and that's why I trusted them to do this too. And like the images are again like reflective of what we're trying to communicate. So there's what is it? It's sort of a genderless and raceless as far as we could depiction so that like anybody could read this and any parents could read it and they could relate to it, you know? So we tried to do as much as
So it's
possible.
like Muppets.
Yes. It's like Snuffleupagus,
Yeah.
but for the punk version.
Recently someone put on Instagram the first time everybody sees Snuffleupagus, and I forgot that there was a reveal, I think in the 90s. Do you remember that?
No.
Because remember that's like the thing throughout Sesame Street that only Big Bird can see Snuffy.
Oh yeah.
And
I guess I didn't remember that he was secret for a while.
for the longest time, it was like Big Bird's imaginary friend. Like, oh, Snuffleupagus, right? And then they had a reveal one day, and it was
He should have
pretty
stayed
adorable.
imaginary. He was
The reveal is kind of adorable. Punk rock in the daycare, how the Stooges can help your toddler.
hell yeah. I'm talking about.
Is it really? You want your kid just smearing peanut butter all over the chest? Now I wanna be a dog.
Yeah, he meant like literally a dog. He didn't mean anything else by that. It's actually very kid friendly built into it. Iggy Pop.
Like those people that were making like
Chasing dragons and being dogs, you know what I mean?
like those people that years ago they made lullabies like out of Radiohead and Metallica songs.
Yeah, they did a Clash one too.
Did they? Which one? London
They
Calling?
did, yeah, they did the whole London Calling album. It's a lullaby version of it.
What did it sound like? Like dark?
It's actually pretty tight. It's good. Like it's good. You know, you can't deny it. When you're for like my sister bought it for me when my daughter was born. It was like the whole album of London Calling as a lullaby, and I was like, all right, when I'm putting her to sleep and I have to stay in her room for like 2 hours just to get her down, I was like, it's pretty tight. I'm just gonna listen to this lullaby. The
Yeah.
whole time.
My son for a while, Disney music put him to sleep.
Damn.
Ah,
You gotta listen to Mulan on repeat.
no, because he's 5, not 24. So there's that. No, just kidding. But
How
no,
old is
he
Mulan? Damn. All right.
hella. That came out when I was in high school. You got to show your kids the new movies. Your daughter was watching Sleeping Beauty like it was brand new.
Thankfully, my daughter never got into Disney at all. She had like a brief 2-week stint with Frozen because her cousins did, but she never got into it.
My sons, all 3 of them, Cars. All 3. Even
Hell
the
yeah.
5-year-old Cars did it for him.
Mulan is 1998. Damn.
Or okay, I was out of high school, but yeah.
Damn.
Yeah, dude, it's old. That stuff is old. It's not even Pixar.
Yeah, everything's Pixar now.
Everything's Pixar. There's some Disney fans in the chat. Hunter's like, no, Mulan was 98.
Except for the Louisiana one that came out a couple of years ago.
Oh, Princess and the Frog.
Yeah, Princess and the
Oh
Frog.
God, yeah. The
What was
black
that? What was the cricket's name? Was it like
Jimmy
Boudreaux?
Cricket.
No, it was
Oh,
like,
in that? Oh, I don't remember.
it was something like super uh Creole. It was
I
like
couldn't get into it if it offended the shit out of me.
Baudou or something like that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it
it
was
was
just so.
super.
Aren't you people happy now? You have your own princess.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what it was.
The Wakanda forever people are losing their damn mind, but people here are losing their mind over you telling us about a young Vladimir Lenin. And what I find the most interesting about this is a lot of people, especially in the online space, Lenin's a static figure. Whatever you read in State and Revolution is how you see Lenin for his entire life.
Hmm.
So tell us a little bit about where these volumes start and the time frame in which he's writing.
So first, I want to say thanks for giving me the opportunity to do these recaps here. As I said, like going through the 45 volumes, I would do a recap every 5 volumes, and so I already did the first one, and so this is a recap of volumes 6 to 10. But I also want to say by now I've gotten some subscribers and followers and people that comment on the videos, and I'm not the best when it comes to talking on video. I'm not the best when it comes to talking in general. I'm a far better writer. But so this is taking some getting used to, and I just wanted to say thank you to everyone who's like helped so far. Um, so books 6 to 10 cover two critical events in the formation of Russian social democracy and Lenin himself as a character. As you said, he's not a static character, and so we have to understand him. And the first of these events is the creation of the Russian Social Democratic Labor Party's platform and the hardening of the factions within it. It's not yet fully the deep divide between Mensheviks and Bolsheviks, but it's the beginning of that. The first dispute was over the role of peasants, for example, and Lenin takes the side that the party, because it embodies the interests of the working class, means that it is not a party that is fighting for the peasants. So that if something comes up in which the interests of the party, as reflective of the working class, is not good for the peasants, they will take the side of the working class against the peasants. And he gets into some debates with the populace over this topic. The populace are trying to appease the peasants more than anything else.
Mhm.
Organizationally, Lenin is advocating for more rigorous training and discipline within the party, which really becomes vivid when debates over the organization of the party emerge at the Second Congress of the Russian Social Democratic Labor Party. At that Congress, there's a character, Julius Martov, who kicks off a long-standing dispute with Lenin over the organization of the party. The key question between them was, and it's very simple, but it gets really complicated when other people tell it sometimes. And simply put, it's whether the party should be broadly inclusive of anyone willing to pay dues to be a party member, as Martov believed that they should, or as Lenin believed, party membership and one's ability to operate within the higher bodies of the party structure must be reserved for people who participate in the party's activities and pay dues. And Lenin argued that restricting membership in that way would help avoid opportunism and other threats to the party. It would help avoid opportunists or anarchists from gaining influence in the party's central, committee. So it's a dispute over what is a member of the party? What constitutes being a member? Is it just the fact that you pay dues and you can, rest on your laurels there, or does it actually take some participation? And this dispute, even though it seems so minor, really like fueled divisions within the party. And Lenin recognized, with the help of Gregory Plekhanov, who was sort of pushing him to make amends with Julius Martov, because it's like today, these feuds at first started theoretical And then they started getting personal. And Lenin finally makes the choice to resign from the party's leading organ, Iskra, which is the newspaper. And he wrote after that another one of his most famous works, which is One Step Forward, Two Steps Back, where he expands on his argument in favor of limited membership, and he really expands on the idea of democratic centralism for the first time, for the first major time. And he argues that centralization from the top down was a way of avoiding deviations in the upper ranks, as I already said. And he says that the party, as the vanguard of the working class, must not be confused with the class itself. So he makes this distinction that there is the party, it represents the working class, but it is not the class itself. So when you start having this mass party idea, you're conflating the class with the party, and so he doesn't want to do that. This is what modern parties like the PSL really base themselves off of, that we are a vanguard. We're not the working class itself, we are a vanguard of the working class. The second major event in these 5 books is the critical, very critical revolutionary year of 1905.
And why is that an important year?
It is what it starts a revolution in what will become sort of a dress rehearsal for 1917, where Russian social democrats, as well as Russians more broadly, not just the socialists, looked on as the czarist armed forces were utterly decimated by Japanese forces in the Far East. And Lenin saw the defeat, the fall of Port Arthur, for example, as an indictment of the Tsar's political system. But it wasn't just Lenin that interpreted it this way. Pretty much all of Russian civil society, if we can call it that at the time, considered it that way. And so in January of 1905, students and workers took to the streets in massive numbers to petition the czar for not just a constitution of some sort, but for some sort of social regulations in terms of work, in terms of social welfare. And the czar's forces responded by gunning them down in what is called Bloody Sunday, not to be confused with the U2 song Bloody Sunday, which is about Ireland's own Bloody Sunday. And Lenin says that while the movement was a revolution in embryonic form, it proved more than anything else that the working class was in fact disorganized, and that they needed a more coordinated leadership who could direct them to effective revolutionary agitation. And more importantly, the revolution of 1905 gave the party, finally, the Russian Social Democratic Party, some real life experience in revolution that allowed them to adjust their ideas and expand their arguments. Because prior to this time, it was all just theorizing. They hadn't actually lived through a real revolutionary moment. But finally, 1905, they get it. So debates within the party emerge about what to do in the case of what they call the democratic revolution. That is the bourgeois revolution. And they start talking about, well, what would happen if the bourgeois revolution happens and there's the creation of a provisional government, of a sort of interim government? Where would the party stand in that case? And Lenin says that the party must participate in these bourgeois institutions as they emerge by way of exposing their bankruptcy. So it's not that they need to participate in them because they believe in these institutions. They need to participate in them because it's only through the Russian Social Democrats that the contradictions of these institutions can be really exposed. And so to Lenin, the revolution also proved the need to unite the party behind a common platform. So again, he's making an effort to avoid the factions within the party, to stave this split between Bolsheviks and Mensheviks. And at the third party Congress, which he unilaterally calls, is intended to do that, but the Menshevik faction decides to boycott the Congress, and they call it invalid and illegally convened, and so it doesn't happen. And then by October of that year, October 1905, the Tsar had sort of recognized that Bloody Sunday was a huge mistake. Civil society is responding. They're losing faith in him. and his ministers, the people around him, and the bourgeois class finally forced him to sign what's called the October Manifesto, which created a legislative Duma that resulted from the revolutionary upheavals of 1905, and also created a lot of new theoretical discourse within the party. So at this point, Lenin defends capitalism actually for the first time, and probably more than any other period in his life, because he argues that in order to have the proletariat revolution, capitalism has to develop in Russia to a certain point where the contradictions become so vivid that the system sort of collapses on itself, so that the proletariat revolution, the next logical stage, is sort of a foregone conclusion and everybody's ready for it. He says that Russia can't skip a stage of development, as the anarchists and other opportunists say that Russia should. Russia can skip, the bourgeois revolutionary stage. And when the proletariat does achieve victory, it will come through the arming of the masses after the bourgeois democratic revolution plays out. So we see Lenin making efforts to bridge the gap between Bolshevik and Menshevik factions. And he argues that it's okay for members within the party to disagree on tactics, to have debates within the party conversations, but that once the party votes together on a slogan, for example, uh, everybody needs to come around to it and accept that slogan as the definitive party platform. And this is, again, setting that basis for what democratic centralism means: the freedom to dispute, the freedom to argue, but the unity of action, acting in unison. And so by the time we get to volume 10, that is in November 1905, Lenin returns to St. Petersburg to work towards reorganizing the party and again striving towards party unity. And the important new element was the creation, of course, of the so-called Soviets, or the workers' councils, which, according to Lenin, needed to be composed of all parties and representatives of the working class, not just the Social Democrats. And he's really adamant about this, that the Russian socialists, the Marxists, can't dominate these Soviets. They have to be comprised of the multiple parties that are involved in working class agitation. Except, he says, anarchists should not be part of the Soviets because they don't believe in parties. And because they don't believe in parties, they don't believe in institutions that house parties, where parties can come and debate. And so he excludes them from the possibility of participating. And within the new politically charged atmosphere of post 1905 Russia, Lenin argues that the party needed to widen its work to legally recognized agitation, as well as the existing illegal or underground work. And so he has this whole article where he argues we need to open cafes, we need to start book clubs, we need to, start bookstores, we need to have our own public spaces where we can do the agitation in public, because now this legislative Duma that the Tsar just granted is giving us the possibility to do that. Of course, the possibility to do that is going to be short-lived, but we're not there yet. So the next few volumes will further develop the split of the party, despite Lenin's efforts to try to not split the party. And of course, it will respond to changes that are underway in Russian legislative politics, when most of the people realized that the October Manifesto wasn't really what they thought it was. It was sort of just the Tsar's way of getting everybody to shut up and then taking everything back. So that's where we are at the end of volume 10. So the next recap will be 11 to 15. And still not at the big Bolshevik Revolution of 1917, but we're at the lead up to it. So there's your summary.
What do you think of Lenin at this point, Alex?
I think he's very pragmatic at this point. I mean, there's two things. So he's pragmatic in the sense that he is responding to events as they happen, and he's willing to adjust a lot of his, hardline positions. And it's sort of, this is one of the areas where it's really revealing that, I'm reading a collection of Lenin's works and not everything around it. Because even in the times where he seems to be trying to bridge the gap between Bolsheviks and Mensheviks,
Mhm.
it doesn't seem that genuine to me, honestly. It's like, the party needs to come together. We need to vote together. We can have debates. I'm going to call the third party Congress to do this. And then when the Mensheviks say, yo, dude, you can't just call the Congress by yourself. That's not how this works.
Mhm.
He gets into polemics with them about, how they gave up the bag because they refused to come. And it's like, that's not really how uh, bridging the gap, bridging the differences
Mhm.
works. And so you can see how I wouldn't call him a dick because he's not a dick, but you could see how he's a very opinionated,
Mhm.
strong-willed person who who believes in his own righteousness,
Mhm.
uh, but is also sort of flexible in the way that, again, he's responding to events as they happen. And so um, I think that over time, this is my suspicion, over time, uh, that flexibility will continue, but that I don't know what the word is for it, that like maybe authoritarian streak will
Mhm.
continue. Although I don't want to say authoritarian in like the classic political sense, because I don't believe that he's a dictator or any sense. But again, I do believe that he's hard headed. That's the word I'm looking for.
Mhm.
He's hard headed. That hard headedness will continue. Um, and so that's where we are right now. We're sort of seeing it in action in these embryonic moments.
I mean, do you think it's a time to be hard-headed in his situation? I mean, they're coming out of a revolution.
It's hard to say because um, the thing that most people do is they try to read Lenin in our own time,
Mhm.
and I do try to avoid that, but I also do that sometimes just for my own mental gymnastics. And so, in thinking about somebody within our own time
Mhm.
who's very hard-headed and very polemic, right? And I can't think of any figure that embodies that person. There's a
Mhm.
lot of people who try. Bob Avakian tries. Brian Baker tries. Who else is there? Joe Sims doesn't really try, but there's a whole bunch of people that are in the socialist communist camp that try to have this hard-headed polemic style of Lenin, but none of them really achieve it. And so I think that um, it's hard to say whether or not that kind of um,
Why do you think they have a hard time trying to achieve it?
well, first, I don't think Americans are uh, susceptible to it. I guess I don't know. Like Americans have that sort of anti-authoritarian ethos, right? And so they see a great a figure or something that tries to kind of present themselves as a intellectual pariah. They reject it, right? And they've come up with some excuse for it. Um, so I don't know. Is he appropriate for his time? Probably at this moment. I mean, probably not. A lot of his own polemics seem to arbitrarily split the
Mhm.
party. And like I said, even though he says I'm making efforts to try to bridge the gap, they
Mhm.
don't seem very genuine. Although, like resigning from Iskra, for example, was his compromise. But all he did was resign from Iskra and then go to found his own organ, Proletari, his own newspaper. So it wasn't like he stepped down from a leadership position and was like, all right, you know what? You guys figure it out. He just went and made his own thing,
Mhm.
which is factional. It becomes like Proletari will become the organ of the Bolshevik faction. Um, and so, yeah, it's hard to say uh, whether at this time he plays a major role in that. I mean, his arguments. I mean, what the important thing to take
Mhm.
is not whether or not objectively he's playing a major role, but that he is putting forward arguments that will become very important later on, like democratic centralism. He's articulating what that means, and you can see him. It's a process, right? Two steps forward, one step back does not set a definitive definition of what democratic centralism is, but it sets the basis of it. This is he has a slogan that is literally uh, uh, about. Well, let me see if I can recall it. Um, Hold on, I can bring it up because I have notes.
Of course you do, Professor.
Freedom of discussion, unity of action. That becomes his slogan, and that's the slogan of democratic centralism, right? You could discuss freely, argue amongst yourself, but when it comes to acting as a party, it needs to be in unison. And so I think that again, taking away these important theoretical uh, points is what's important for him here, not how important, because he wasn't even in Russia when the revolution of 1905 happened. He was abroad. He comes to Russia after it happens to try to help reorganize the party, but he's not even there. And there will be people, especially in the Menshevik camp, who say, like, this guy's crazy. He hasn't been to Russia in years, especially in 1917 when he comes back and reads the April Theses.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone's going to laugh at him because he hadn't been to Russia for over 10 years. So they'd be like, you don't even know what's going on here. But regardless, that's later on. It's where we are now.
From this stage in Lenin's life, what can we take away from it in the contemporary sense?
That's a good question. I think the most important thing to take away is be willing to work across, partisan lines. There's a difference between like theoretical differences, right? If you, for example, when he says that the anarchists cannot join the Soviet Workers' Councils because they are not a party, they don't believe in state institutions, and so therefore they can't pretend to care because this is theoretically against them. That's okay, in my opinion. But when it comes to like interfactional arguing between parties that are ultimately Marxist or socialist, I think that Lenin's example at this time is probably kind of a cautionary tale, right? That you don't need to be so polemic with other people who are historical materialists and see the world through class analysis. You could kind of try to see commonalities with them in what Lenin calls the short-term program rather than the long-term program.
Can that be? Can that be? I don't want to say beneficial. Can that be bad for you in the long run, though?
No, I wouldn't say so. I mean, if I like looking ahead, obviously the consequence of that is that after 1917, when the socialists, I'll just call them socialists, do win, after power is declared, Soviet power is declared, then the sort of I don't want to call it purging, but the kind of exclusion of other socialist trends and socialist deviance is more appropriate, because at that point then it's like, well, now you're just working against the party and thus the state rather than working with us.
Why
But
do you not want to call it a purge?
that's a maximum program rather than a minimum program. I think when you're working towards minimum programs, right? And in this case, the minimum program of the Russian Social Democratic Party is to topple the czar, to eliminate autocracy. And I think that for that, you don't need these like theoretical kind of disputes. Not too many about like party organization or whatever. You just kind of need people to be on the same page that this is the minimum program. It's when you try to achieve the maximum program, the foundation of socialism, the building of socialism, that maybe you start to kind of eliminate people who are working against that. I don't want to call it a purge because that term is really loaded in Soviet history. A lot of people think that purging means killing, but it didn't. It just meant kicking them out of the party.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
I mean, a lot of purging happens with Stalin, though. Would you say, or no? Would you say it's kicking out of the party?
yeah, I mean, in the case of Stalin, there's a lot of purging in both sense. There's a lot of kicking them out of the party and killing and exiling and imprisoning and all of that. And that's another story. That's probably for Stalin in 13 volumes when that happens.
Are you going to do that too, or you don't want to?
We'll see how we'll see when I get to the end of Lenin. But I do have all 13 volumes of Stalin's collected works, so it could happen.
Have you been getting any pushback from any of these from anybody online or in your Substack?
No, but I kind of wish I did.
Why is that?
Not really pushback, but but I want people to like give me pointers because I don't like the whole video thing. I'm not good at it. Like I'm not good at talking. As I said, I'm a much better writer. And so when I do these, I am reading like a script and I try to be as personable and like fluid as possible. And so I look back at them and I'm like, man, I'm like a robot. You know what I mean?
I think people are fine with that. I feel like the more, maybe mildly autistic you come off, the more people will like you. Like you're some
Yeah.
sort of Rain Man of Russian history.
The nerd of Russian history.
Yeah, you're fine. You're fine. You can't be like the Fonz of Russian history. Like, hey, Lenin over here.
I do get a lot of people that hit me up and they ask me if I've like watched so and so's YouTube of Lenin or if I watched Brian Becker's. He did like a series on Lenin or something like that. And like, yes, I've watched some of them. Need some Soviet punk in the background. That's right. I have watched Brian Becker's, for example, but I kind of like cringe from it because I think that, and maybe this will spark a debate. Actually, I won't debate him. I don't want to entertain that idea. But
Why is
anyway,
that?
um,
Are you chicken?
I just don't like debates. I think everyone just talks over each other.
I mean, what are you trying to win? I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
That's how I look at it. Like, what is the goal here?
People have asked me, like, would you debate so and so? And it's like, no, because I don't feel like talking over the other person. I don't feel like trying to cut in.
Do you feel like those people just want to see a fight?
Yeah.
But they don't want to watch like a fight. Just watch a fight. I don't want to watch Destiny yell at Ryan Grimm.
I'll get in a ring with Brian Baker. Dog, I'll fuck him up. Lenin style.
I don't think the conversation goes anywhere. I think it's just people trying to, oh, you're wrong there.
Yeah.
In the internet sense, right? The internet's destroyed debate. But look, let's ask some questions. Look at that. I'm sure you guys have questions for Professor Dr. Alexander Herbert about
Right. So if you have questions about Lenin, of course I would really like that. But I've been no, I'm serious. I've been creating a syllabus on Eastern European history. I've been reading a lot about Eastern Europe because my training is in Russian history, which is a very specific field, in what's called modern Europe, which my advisor for that field was a French historian. And so the narrative of modern Europe is very French centric. So I've been reading more about like Romania and Hungary, etc., and trying to create a syllabus for that, and trying to use a lot of like Roma folklore they have like a lot of stories about witches and vampires and stuff, but that are more reflective of like the multiple ethnicities and the weird paganistic Christianity that develops in that place. So if you got questions about that stuff too,
I think we have a first question. Eric W.
what's Lennon's take on the hose? He doesn't. So that's probably just the way that the works of this collection were chosen, but he don't mention hoes at all. He's too concerned with the revolution. He doesn't get even Krupskaya, who he is like he's with by this point, of course.
Mhm.
Um, Even she's devoted to the revolution. Honestly, it's my revolutionary dream. You know, I got
So,
I want to find my Krupskaya.
oh,
Like like we just chill. We
mhm.
chill at home at the end of the day, but we're reading in the same room. We're talking. We got discourse going on, and then I'm like, make me some potatoes. You know, something like that. Something like that. You know, I'm dreaming of that.
Make me some potatoes. Is it like the movie Up, where when you're reading, you put your hand on the thing, and then her hands touches yours while you're
Yeah,
reading?
there doesn't need to be any talking. You're just reading in the same space. You know,
That is adorable. That
I'll
is
do the
adorable.
dishes. You do the cooking. This is how we divide labor.
Teamwork.
That's right.
Teamwork.
But no, Lenin doesn't talk about. Actually, I can't think of a single text so far in the first 10 volumes that is specifically about what's called at the time the women's question. There's a lot about the Jewish question,
Mhm.
and where the Jewish people fit into um, the Russian Social Democratic Party, but nothing about women yet. I'm sure it will come up.
Where does Lenin think Jewish people fit in the Russian Socialist Democratic Party?
They need to be a part of the party and not as their own separate entity. Because there are people in the Bund, for example, who think that the Jewish socialists need their own party because their interests are in some cases separate from the rest of the Russian ethnic Russian working class. And Lenin says no, it all needs to be in the same umbrella. Like you can have your own separate Jewish organizations,
Mhm.
but you're still under the same vanguard party.
And when does Lenin discuss or differentiate the proletariat and peasantry? And that's from Hunter M.
It's one of That's a great question because that's one of the first major topics that he writes about in volume one, I believe. His first major work is on the Russian peasantry. Again, and his argument there is that they're becoming proletarianized in the sense that after the emancipation of the serfs, land in the rural areas has been privatized, and that is making a lot of these peasants flee the rural areas and go into the cities. But then it's also creating landlords who exact rent from the peasants, and in order to pay that rent they work on the landlord's property,
Mhm.
creating these like rural proletariat. By this point, at volume 5, 6 and 7, he still talks about the peasantry because the party has to have a articulate platform on peasant politics because Russia is primarily a peasant country.
Mhm.
But as he says, I forget the name of the article, but his argument is that we are a party that represents the working class, and that is mostly the urban, that is exclusively the urban working class, and so that's where our interests lie, and that's where our base is. And if the interests of the working class contradicts the interests of the peasantry, if there's a difference, a clash between the two interests, we will choose the working class because that's our base. And these are the people that are capable of revolution, meaningful revolution, according to Lenin.
We have another question here from Sean Moon. What is your opinion of the late Russia scholar Stephen F. Cohen?
Oh, that's a good question.
Are you afraid you're not going to be diplomatic enough? Or
No, I don't have that many problems with Stephen Cohen. A lot of people do because he wasn't a communist. He was, I would call him like socialist sympathetic. he's of the same generation of people like Moish Lewin, that were coming out of their real time to shine was in the 1990s, the early 1990s. And Stephen Cohen, along with Moish Lewin and some others, were the first Western historians that got access to the previously 100% closed presidential archives of Russia in the
Oh, wow.
Soviet Union. And Stephen Cohen wrote one of the first major biographies of Nikolai Bukharin, who was one of the old Bolsheviks and a victim of Stalin's purges in the 1930s. He was the victim of one of the major Moscow show trials. And on a personal level, I love Nikolai Bukharin. He's probably my favorite Bolshevik theorist of them all. And so the trial of Bukharin and his assassination, his killing, his execution was something that for me, I could never forgive Stalin for, because I don't think that it was deserving.
Mhm.
And Stephen Cohen gained access to the archive for the first time, in which Bukharin was sending letters to Stalin and kept his own diary in prison that was like tucked away in the presidential archive that nobody could have access to. And so Stephen Cohen was one of the first to actually get his hands on this stuff and say, like, there are, like, Bukharin was somebody who obviously ideologically challenged Stalin in a way, probably making Stalin feel like theoretically insecure in some ways, but also uh, humanized him, I guess. And so I appreciate Stephen Cohen for that. He did have some really shitty politics, um, but you know,
As a historian, he got some things right.
as a historian, I think he did some great services. Yeah. There was a there was a biography of Bukharin that came out in '73. It's an older one. Um, and there's the later one too.
Omar asks, didn't Lenin denounce free love?
I'm not sure about that. I don't see why he would. He had, I mean, I'm not there yet in the readings, but I have read, of course, some of his conversations with Alexandra Kollontai about the so-called women's question. And Kollontai is one of those people that advocated for free love.
Dizzle McFizzle says, no time for hoes. I got czars to topple, baby.
That's it.
Trying to find some more questions here. This is a good question here. What was Lenin's opinion on raisin carrot salad?
Actually, you may be surprised because you may be surprised
Uh-huh.
because
Mhm.
Russians do make a salad
Mhm.
that is mayonnaise. There's
Mhm.
usually raisins in it. There's
Mhm.
definitely carrots in it.
Oh yeah,
There's potato in it,
that's not what's going to be in mine.
and I forget what it's called.
Delicious.
They love it, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Look at that. Me and Lenin eating the same thing. You guys think it's a coincidence? It's not. It's not. It's the meal of champions.
That's right.
That's my way of saying fuck your Wheaties. Timothy Cornerson says, what would Lenin be doing in Russia today?
Fighting against Putin.
I could see that. There would be no Putin if Lenin was alive today.
I mean, I'm just assuming that
If he got out of
was.
that grave and like came to life, Putin is done. You're done, Putin. Could could he capture the people? I
Um,
mean, it's such a different time.
are we talking about a Lenin that comes back from the grave? Because in
If we
that
have like
case,
if we have the power of multiverses,
yes.
and you and I are like Loki going through multiverses, and we find a universe where Lenin and his socialist scientists found the secret to life to make sure they kept their leaders alive forever. We kidnap that Lenin in our Bill and Ted phone booth because we have a lot of things in this fantasy.
Yeah. If the
Um, we bring him back. Would the Russian people be like, "Oh, thank you, you're finally back," or would they be like, "Ooh"?
if the historical legacy of Lenin were a thing that, yeah, I think Russians, and that's important, Russians would take him back. Because you can look at charts, graphs about political leaders of Russia's past, and Lenin is always still a favorite that people remember.
Mhm.
Lenin and Brezhnev, actually.
Why
Uh,
Brezhnev?
Brezhnev, because it was sort of the apogee of Soviet power and influence and affluence. People had more. Consumer spending was better under Brezhnev. People had luxury goods for the first time, so people remember that. Um, if we're talking about a Lenin, like he's a baby and then he grows up in Russia. Let's say he was born in 2000 and now he's 24.
Mm.
Then no, I'm not sure that. I mean, he probably wouldn't be in Russia, right? He'd be in exile, be a
Mm.
political opposition.
Um, Here's another question. Omar's firing him off. How did Lenin envision socialism pre the appearance of the Soviet? And what were his initial thoughts of the Soviets?
How did he envision socialism before the appearance of the Soviets? Um, it's hard to say. It's not something that he particularly writes about.
Mhm.
For him, it's for him, that's why the revolution of 1905 is so important. I think because that gives them the possibility um, to start to think about what socialism looks like. I mean, obviously, he has the traditional theoretical understanding of socialism, right? That it is first a proletariat revolution, proletarian dictatorship, the overthrowing of bourgeois class relations, the redistribution of the means of production and wealth, et cetera, et cetera. That's what he sees it should be in Russia. Um, but I guess the question is, how exactly? For him, it's obviously an armed uprising, but it's not until 1905 where they start to talk about the so-called provisional government and the stages of revolution. And the Soviets, they appear in 1905 with these revolutionary situations, and he adopts them immediately, right? Because they are workers' legislative councils. They are workers' councils, and so they are the manifestation of working class power in a sort of embryonic form. And so when that happens for him, it's a massive positive development. But like he says, they shouldn't be dominated. They shouldn't be exclusively made of Marxists and socialists. They have to be comprised of the different parties that represent the working class so that we can have debates, we can have discussions about this stuff. He says that while that is the case, they shouldn't be dominated by the Russian Social Democrats have to have a consistent, disciplined line within the councils so that they'll people will fall for them. People will be enamored by their discipline, by their ideas, their consistency. And so he says, yeah, we should have a bunch of opinions, but as a party, we have to be rock solid.
And Omar wants to follow up with, did Lenin write about Zionism? What were his thoughts or opinions?
He didn't write about, I haven't seen him write about Zionism specifically yet. He does talk about, again, this what was called the Jewish question, which is he hasn't really worked out a model of nationalities policy broadly conceived at this point, and sort of naively he just thinks that every nation should be given its autonomy and self-determination and blah blah blah. And then the question is, okay, well, what happens with the Jewish people? Because in Europe, they don't have a nation. They are an ethnicity, they're a religion, but they don't have a defined home. And so that forms the basis of arguments among Jewish socialists that we need to have our own organization, our own wing of the party that can advocate for Jewish
Statehood.
self-determination. And Stalin says, no, you shouldn't. You should be a part of the party. You can, again, you can have your own organizations, but it doesn't mean that you're separate. You're not any more privileged than ethnic Russians or ethnic Poles or ethnic Ukrainian working class people within the party. Sort of his
Um,
argument.
okay. Andrew Robles asks, what are some good secondary texts on Lenin?
That's a good question. I actually compiled a list. Um, Again, because like you said, I am an academic. Um, and some people might have disputes with some of these, but my personal favorite is Dmitry Volkogonov, who obviously in the 1990s he was a member of the party. He was an upper member of the party in throughout the 70s and 80s, and in the 90s he was a sort of defector. He left the party and he renounced communism altogether, and then he wrote these biographies of Lenin, Stalin, and Trotsky. And so there's a lot of people, especially socialists, who have real problems with his biographies, because obviously he was trying to diminish the reputation of Lenin in his book. That is like his stated goal, to kind of bring Lenin down a peg from this pedestal that he had been put on in the Soviet Union. But what's interesting about Volkogonov is that, again, he had access to all of these primary sources that were not used before, because most of the biographies of Lenin that existed before the 90s, they relied on the same primary source collection that I'm using. They didn't rely on, because they didn't have access to archives. And Volkogonov is the first that gets access to like personal letters and stuff like that. Now there are problems with it, of course. He like really over sensationalizes Lenin's love interest with Anessa Arman. Part of the reason of doing that is to say that, well, if Lenin cheated on Krupskaya, then he must be morally impure, which is like bullshit. You got to have some hoes, you know. And Anessa Arman was hot. What the fuck, you know?
Once again, what did Lenin think of carrot salad? Is it a working class dish?
So there's some so if he liked carrot salad. How many times I have to tell you people? The fuck, man. Russians love salads that aren't really salads, and carrot salad's one of them. You ever have, like, I don't know if anybody knows what this is, because I've only ever seen it in Eastern Europe. It's called sparja. It's a Korean dish. It's like fermented soy, but Russians mix it with carrots, and they call it sparja salad. It's fucking delicious.
Does Lenin have an opinion, from Dizzle McFizzle, on the lumpen proletariat?
Not yet. Nothing yet. Not that I've seen yet. I'm sure that something will come up probably after 1917 with trying to employ everybody.
Sean Moon is thanking me for asking you that question earlier, but Sean Moon, the question really is, did you listen to Def Leppard all through the night? That's the question, Sean Moon. I haven't seen you respond, so be warned.
Wait a minute.
For you, nigga.
If you haven't listened to that.
Wait a minute. Wait. Yeah. Def Leppard for real?
Def Leppard's first two records are some bangers. I love the first two. I always, maybe a couple times a month, like on a Saturday or Sunday, I just blare on through the night and high
Is
and dry.
that ableism on you? You only like it
The
because
drummer had both his arms.
the drummer had both his arms?
He had both his arms on Pyromania, which was their first massive hit. But I guess High and Dry had Headed for a Heartbreak on it, which was their first big radio hit. But go back and listen to those early Def Leppard records with the other guitar player before they got Phil Collin. A little heavier, a lot more hard rocky, less shine on the production. I really like, especially High and Dry. Love those records when they were trying to be more Zeppelin, early Zeppelin-y.
I have to go back and listen
Go
to it.
back
I'm
and
not a
listen to
big
it.
fan of Def Leppard, but I'll give a good faith re-listen to
You know,
it.
if you go back and listen to some of those bands that didn't hit in the early 80s, like Whitesnake, the original Fool for Your Lovin' from 1984, that's a heavy song. That's a rocking ass song. I've been listening to this stuff because I went back and listened to all the Van Halen up until the 5150, which is when they get Sammy Hagar in the band. It's been an interesting time at my place in Mexico, Alex.
Hey, I gotta come back down and visit. I gotta keep you company, dog. You go nuts.
Yeah, I'm going a little mad.
And DC's not gonna help. Washington DC's not gonna help that.
It's not gonna be. Well, because we're writing this, but we'll talk about this more Thursday. Because we're writing this book, I'm just revisiting a lot of music arguments I've had in my own head.
Yeah.
And with people like post Black Album era Metallica. So the other day, when I was finishing the article, I was listening to the Black Album, Load, Reload, and Saint Anger. Oof. Those are not good records. Some of those records I did not.
Saint Anger is terrible, but it had kind of a revival like a couple years ago. There were people I saw that were like trying to be like, it's actually not bad. It's just different.
No, it's not good.
I think it's a terrible album.
I remember a buddy of mine, we went to the theater to see Some Kind of Monster. We were all stoked for Saint Anger. Oof, we were let down.
So I remember when Saint Anger came out, I was young, so I was too young to have a job, so I had to like get money from my parents somehow to get it. But I really wanted it. I was like, this album's gonna be dope. And then my dad like never gave me money my entire life. And I asked my mom for money, and she was like, ask your father. And I was like scared. I was like, oh shit. Yeah. But I wanted it so bad that I was like, Dad, can you buy me the CD? And it was the first time that he was like, why do you want it? Like, he gave me some shit at first. He's like, why do you want it? It's not good music, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I just want it. It's like the band I like. And I convinced him. He was like, all right, I'll get it for you. I listened to it, and it was like tears in my eye. I was like, I believe this was the first album that you were willing to buy for me. This is a terrible album.
It was just like, why does it have to? You know what I did here? So through AI, there's some interesting things that people do with Metallica albums. And one thing someone did, so before all the AI music stuff, there was a dude, one guy, he replayed every instrument. And what Lars did in Saint Anger, why it really does sound so bad, besides song structure, is he takes the bottom of the snare off, that thing that makes it sound like a snare. He popped that off. That's why it has that, sounds like a hidden tin can. He just fixed the snare basically by playing those drum parts, same exact drum parts, but with an actual put together snare. And he can sing really good, like James Hetfield. He can nail all the Hetfield parts. If I find it for you, I'll play it. It's actually pretty good. It's not bad. And then there's people that through AI will correct the snare, just like they do with And Justice for All. They'll actually redo it with bass. I've seen people do it with tuned down to A sharp and all this other stuff. So through AI, you can hear all these records. I don't know, but it's better, but just different. Maybe the way you want them to sound. It doesn't really matter with that album because I think the structure of the songs were just kind of repetitive for no reason. And as a good friend of mine said when it came out, he goes, "Man, I just don't like all the 12-step bullshit and all these
Yeah,
lyrics."
for real. No, it was a terrible album, but there are people that are trying to like humanize it now.
Don't do that.
Um, there were some more questions
I'm getting to him. Jesus.
that I saw.
Why are you being so difficult? Oh, here we go. Here we go. This is a super chat. Thank you, Kowalski. As a petite bourgeois farmer from middle America, I must say that I am a bit conflicted on this whole communism thing. Will communism give me the the goth farmer wife of my dreams? If so, I'm in.
Absolutely. It's all yeah, absolutely. There'll be goth farmer wives for everyone if that's what you desire.
Here's another question. This is more for you, Alex, personally. Who's more fuckable, young Stalin or young Lenin?
Young Lenin.
Okay.
Young Stalin was pockmarked and stuff, and I don't think I got to think about skin. I got to think about greasy skin. I don't know. What you don't see in those young photos of young Stalin is just how like pockmarked and like kind of fucked up his face was. He had real problems with acne and stuff. And Lenin has got like that Asiatic vibe. You know what I mean? Like he's like the hot, half white, half Asian dude. He's got it going on. All those photos of young Stalin are airbrushed as fuck. He was like the first filter.
So you're saying Stalin was like, I need glamour shots.
Yeah. Yeah.
What if Lenin were a zombie?
That's from The Simpsons. Remember that scene when he comes back?
No, I don't. I've
Back to
never
life.
seen it. Lenin would be an ultra poser on Substack and Twitter, says someone. Wow, that's
I don't think that. I mean, I think that if Lenin were alive today, he probably would not live up to the. It would take him a couple years to catch up on everything. I think he wouldn't. But also, like, there's this famous book. Maybe some of your listeners have read it, "The Brothers Karamazov" by Dostoevsky. And there's a famous chapter in that book, "The Grand Inquisitor," which has been isolated and it's used in like philosophy classes because the theoretical point that is made in that chapter, one of the brothers makes the argument that if Jesus were to reappear today and he'd come back to life and he'd say, "I am the Son of God," reincarnate, we would just kill him again. And so the same could probably be said of Lenin, right? If somebody like that were to come today, we wouldn't believe him. We'd be like, "This dude's crazy," if he were a zombie. So that's my articulate answer.
Didn't Putin call Lenin an idiot or something? Says Jim.
No, but he did say that Lenin was responsible for the creation of Ukraine. I don't think he ever called him an idiot because that would be like political suicide. Because, like I said, Lenin is still pretty popular. But he did say that Lenin is responsible for the creation of Ukraine, which there's some truth. I mean, there's not. That's like 5% true. It's not really that true. Lenin allowed for Ukraine to become its own republic, to have self-determination and sovereignty. But Ukrainian nationalism had been something that was like germinated for a very long time before then. So,
Time Traveler 101 on Twitch says, what changes do you think Lenin would make if he could see into the future?
he'd probably have like Yeltsin shot as a kid or something.
Yeltsin as a kid.
Yeah.
Like John Connor.
Yeah,
Like
I don't even think.
shit.
Yeah, I don't even think like Lenin would peek into the future and he would see Gorbachev and he'd be like, "Okay, all right, we can accept that." But if he saw someone like Yeltsin, he'd be like, "No, this guy, we need to stop this guy." because I think it's Yeltsin that really undid the Soviet Union more than Gorbachev. It's interesting that so many people put the blame on Gorbachev, but it was really Yeltsin who made a lot of disingenuous arguments and convinced the Russian people that he was, the harbinger of a new Russia. So
Sean Moon is really feeling himself, even though he hasn't proven that he's purified himself in the waters of Def Leppard's first two albums. Had Lennon lived to see World War II, how would this have affected his politics?
It's interesting to say. Because essentially the question is, would he have supported this like anti-fascist coalition with the United States and with Britain? It's hard to say. My first instinct is to always default to the class reading because that's probably what Lenin would have done. And so, in thinking about how he talked about World War One, right, that this is the culmination of capitalists in feud with international capitalism, in feud with itself, and reaching a point where it can't break out of the confines that are now binding it. One example in his own space being the British and German tensions over markets in the Balkans, for example. And so I think he would have seen World War II in a similar way. And again, some of your listeners might dislike me for saying this, but I think it's absolutely true that if you read Trotsky's writing during the Second World War about the emergence of fascism and how it is kind of this, it is the petty bourgeois trying to assert itself as separate from the rest of the bourgeois class and trying to kind of weld together this old, dying, decrepit aristocracy with the bourgeoisie in opposition to a worker state. I think Lenin would have probably agreed with that. I think a lot of what Trotsky wrote in the 30s, Lenin probably would have agreed with.
And Connor asks, sorry if this was already talked about, what would Lenin say is the most important issue for Palestine or Palestinian workers?
Well, he would ask, first of all, are there workers? Is there a working class in Palestine? And then, of course, like he would absolutely say that Palestine should be its own state, should have national independence to determine its own structure, its own politics, its own social organization. And in general, I don't think that Lenin would have ever agreed to the creation of Israel, just because. It's hard to say
because of what it would have done to the people that were already there.
Yeah, I mean, he would have seen it as for what it is. It's the on the ground arm of Western imperialism in so many ways in the Middle East, and I think he would have recognized that, especially with all the politics that were going on in the Middle East in his own time, right? He would have seen that Britain, even Germany, leading up to the First World War, but particularly Britain and France, were like really reaching for some kind of legitimacy in the Middle East to hold on to some power. They were using Egypt at first, then they fucked with the Shah, for example. And so the creation of Israel, I think he would have seen as this is just imperialism kind of working itself out in the Middle East, trying to really get a hold of the oil markets that are there.
And Connor follows that up with, you talk a lot in your series how Lenin is changing according to his historical circumstances. Still, is there anything that Lenin says stays consistent on throughout your reading?
So far, well, I mean, it goes without saying, first of all, that so far Stalin is a historical materialist. He's a Marxist. So the way that he analyzes events as they emerge are through a materialist lens. He's always looking at economic incentives or the economic causes for things happening, and in the creation of class solidarity, class consciousness. In terms of like theoretical ideas, um, once he works out the basic scaffolding of democratic centralism, he's really hammering it home now. Like he's getting it. You can see him actively developing the theory. Two steps forward, one step back is kind of him really putting it down in articulate terms. But he's been working with that idea for a long time, which is again freedom of discussion, unity of action, right? And that's sort of the main pillar. Um, but in general, that's really it. And it's just because, he's not a fortune teller as much as none of us are, so he can't see what's going to happen. When the revolution of 1905 breaks out, I wouldn't say that he's surprised, but he is in a way, because the way that it developed, the way that it sort of unfolded while he wasn't in Russia, I don't think that anyone really saw. Like it's sort of, it's telling too that the leaders of that 1905 revolution, the people who started it, are students, and that's to him that I don't think he ever wrote before then that students would be the ones that would start a revolution. Right? For him, it was always a trained, articulate, militant working class. That's who will do it. But in this case, you have the students, and so now he has to sort of think about, well, what does it mean that the students were the ones that did it?
What did Lenin think about Lady Gaga?
You would have hated Lady Gaga, like the rest of us. He would definitely be on board with this anti-celebrity uh, block list that people are
Is that
doing.
your new thing right now? Are you blocking celebrities that you don't follow?
Dog, I never followed celebrities
Yeah,
to begin with. Like that's the
exactly.
thing. When this is getting so big, and there are accounts that are sharing it and being like, "I blocked all these," and I'm like, "You followed them to begin with?" Like
I just don't know what it's gonna do. Like they're gonna be like, oh no.
they have PR people that can make up for any differences.
You know what's funny? People think they care.
Yeah, yeah, they don't. Yeah, of course not.
That's the whole reading their mean tweets on Jimmy Kimmel. Like they don't see that shit. Uh, did Lenin take a position of Pogs?
Uh, Wait a minute. I have to.
Oh, there's a quote. There's a Pog quote.
No, I have to.
You have to make sure that you're going to keep your job.
Well, I think, uh, considering that there's a definite trajectory in the aging of Russian women,
Mhm.
from glam to babushka, I think that you naturally have to acquiesce to pogs if you're going to become one with Russian women. I've seen some hot Russian women, but I won't date them because I know what they're going to look like when they're older.
Wow.
It's foolproof.
We just got so many hate messages because
I again,
you're laughing because you don't have to like read them.
again, this is scripted. Jason,
Jason wrote it all out.
no, I mean that's my honest answer. Did Lenin have a position on Pogs? That's the most honest answer that I could give you.
This is the last question because we got to go to the champagne room. Given America isn't much of a world power, what, if any, were Lenin's thoughts on America?
You'd actually be surprised. I think that a lot of these Bolshevik revolutionaries, they first of all they recognized the United States as the premier emerging capitalist power, one that was unfettered from the disputes of the old world, and one that uh, a lot of the future of the international revolution would rest on what would happen in the United States. Um, and they also understood that the political structure of the United States was not very conducive of a revolution. But But they were hopeful that I think they just assumed that, especially after 1917, that the American Communist Party, if it could come together and be unified and try to, create what was called the Unity Party, then uh, it would uh, create the revolutionary conditions in all of North and South America, or North America in particular. Um, I wrote an article about this on my Substack about the problem with American communism, and the main problem is, and the Bolsheviks knew it, that Americans cannot come together. They can't agree on anything. They're so individualistic that back then, as in today, there's so many socialist parties that are claiming that they are, the party, rather than working together in a common communist platform. So,
Are you going to join me in the champagne room?
yeah, I'll be there.
Okay. Well, thank you guys for hanging out with me and Alex. This was a look at that. I have no idea why that's on the screen, but it's a dope mug.
You should buy that mug.
You should get that mug.
After you contribute to the Indiegogo campaign.
If you guys get that mug, Alex gets. What does Alex get?
A high five.
No, we got to get you something. What do you get if you get that mug? Alex gets Jeez, what do you need?
A reassuring pat on my bottom.
That can be arranged. I can have that DoorDash to you. You'd be surprised if you can pay for it on DoorDash.
Hell yeah. Yeah. No, I don't need anything. I mean, I need money, honestly. Put it to the campaign, I guess. I do have a friend that consistently wants to send me money, and they're like, "You do so much, you deserve it." And I'm like, "Yeah, but don't just send me money. Like, I'm doing so much stuff, the Indiegogo thing,
Mhm.
the Lenin in 45 volumes,
Mhm.
the movie.
Mhm.
I'm like, put the money towards something that I'm doing. Like, come to the movie premiere and donate it or something. Don't give it to me for free." But if you want to help right now, the hair plugs. If you
You don't
want to
wanna
help,
help, dude.
definitely contribute to the Indiegogo. Even like $5 is a lot.
I feel so bad. Someone said I didn't ask the questions about women. I literally didn't see them, guys. I was not moving with the chat, trying to get to the questions. Alex definitely gives in-depth answers. If you leave your questions in the comments, I promise you, Alex will read them. I will send them to him so he can respond to you guys. You would read the comments on this show, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. You read
Well,
them.
I mean, the only questions about women that I saw were about Pogs and about whether there's a side shot of Krupskaya's behind. I didn't see any, and then the one about women's liberation that I couldn't answer, but I didn't see any other ones.
Well, Alex and I will be in the champagne room. Thank you guys so much for watching. Wherever you are watching or listening to this later, there's links in the description to Alex's YouTube channel for Lenin in 45 volumes. There's also links to Alex's Substack. There's also links to the article Alex and I wrote that we will be talking about Thursday.
I'm excited for that.
This is Revolution. We're definitely going to get into the weeds on all things punk, all things sellout. It will be a fun conversation. I'm looking forward to this show. The article did well in Sublation, by the way.
Hell yeah.
I guess people read it and liked it and had some things to say. We're going to the champagne room. If you guys are already patrons, there's a link already up. If you're not, it's easy to become one. Patreon.com/Bitter Lake Presents. As easy as that. $3 a month, $30 for the year. And if you're just TIR patron champagne room curious, there's a free tier where you can try it out for 7 days. On that note, thank you, Alex. We'll see you guys in the champagne room, and we are out.